After yet another horrible loss, this one to the Indianapolis Colts, one thing is clear about the 2024 New York Jets. This is a horrible football team in every way imaginable. There's nothing good you can say about this team. Let's discuss today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, November 18th, 2024. I hope you're having a better day than the New York Jets. I'm your host, John B. from ganggreennation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. Well, unfortunately, today we have to recap another horrible loss for the New York Jets. These losses come in all shapes and sizes, but they're all horrible. Yesterday's defeat was at the hands of the Indianapolis Colts, 28-27 at MetLife Stadium. The Jets are now 3-8 on the season. Each week, it feels like the Jets keep telling us that they're going to turn it around, that the schedule is starting to open up, that these games are going to get easier, the team's going to start clicking, and it never happens. The schedule is not opening up. The Jets are worse than all of these teams that they're playing, and the Jets will continue to be worse than almost every team that they play from this point going forward. I think it's fair to say at this point, there is nothing good about this team. I mean, does this team have a good defense? I don't care about these statistics. Normally, I would not say that because I think sometimes people say that and they're just trying to, throw their opinion when there's objective data contradicting them. That's not true in this case. This is a bad defense. Now, the defense will take a hit statistically based on its performance yesterday, but this defense does not come through in the key moments. Second time in 4 weeks, not just any quarterback, a quarterback who's been benched leads not one, but two scoring drives in the fourth quarter against this Jets defense. This Jets defense allowed not only did they allow two scoring drives in the fourth quarter to lose the game, not only did they fail to hold an 8-point lead, let's talk about what happened in the first half. The defense allowed points on 3 straight possessions to start the game for Indianapolis. So Jets are down 13-0 before the fans feel comfortable in their seats. 13. I don't think we talk enough about the first half of these games. The points that are scored or not scored in the first half of these games count just as much as the points that are scored in the second half. The fourth quarter is not the only thing that decides the game. Jets put themselves in a 13-point hole in the first half, and one of the reasons that's significant is there are scenarios where you dig yourself out of a 13-point hole and still lose the game because you have to play almost perfect football the rest of the way to overcome an early 13-point deficit. The defense put them in that hole. I mean, who's playing well on this defense right now? Quinnen Williams? Okay, maybe I said there's nothing good you can say about the team. Maybe maybe you shouldn't take that totally literally. Quinnen Williams is playing well. Quinnen Williams took advantage of this offense, but who else is playing well? Sauce Gardner's regressed. I have no idea what's happened to Sauce Gardner. I'm done defending Sauce Gardner, though, until he starts playing like the Sauce Gardner of 2022 and 2023. Got beat in coverage a couple more times, another really bad missed tackle, a busted coverage, which he seemed at least partially responsible for, which set the Colts up. It got the Colts rolling on that final series when Indianapolis just roared down the field. And 6 plays, they went 70 yards. And the Jets defense couldn't stop anything in that series. Sauce Gardner's just looking like a bad player. Hassan Reddick, is this guy even on the field? This guy made a lot of noise about how he deserves to be the highest paid, one of the highest paid defensive ends in the league. See if on the field. The Jets defensive line, not getting to Anthony Richardson against 3 rookies on the offensive line. And the Jets defense in this game faced a quarterback who entered the contest completing 44% of his passes and a team that was starting 3 rookies on the offensive line. And they allowed 28 points. They allowed the Colts to jump out to a 13-0 lead. They allowed the Colts to go down the field for 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to win the game. This defense stinks. Is the offense good? I don't want to hear that the offense scored 27 points. I don't want to hear that this was a season high. This offense did not generate a first down until 28 minutes into the game. I think that had something to do with the Jets losing. Again, the points you score or don't score in the first half still count. And when you put yourself in an early 13-0 hole, the defense did it. The offense also did it. You can dominate. Let's just think this through, because the score was 13-0 before the Jets had their first down, 28 minutes into the game. So essentially, if you outscore your opposition by 12 points over a 32-minute stretch, you've dominated the game. But that wasn't good. That's not good enough when you're down 13-0, 28 minutes into the game. Jets had 3 passing yards 25 minutes into this game. Jets only had 10 first downs. You can say 27 points, but let's be honest. They hit a 58-yard field goal. They hit a miracle field goal in this game. They had 3 other scoring drives, which started at least at the Jets' 40-yard line, 2 of which started in the Indianapolis side of the field. They only had 10 first downs. They were not moving the ball consistently. 5 straight 3-and-outs to start the game, one of which turned into a 4-and-out. This offense is just bad. Who played well on offense? Breece Hall and Devontae Adams. And that's about it. Maybe we'll review the film and find an offensive lineman or 2 played well, but of the skill players, Breece Hall and Devontae Adams were the only ones who showed up in this one. That includes the quarterback. Does this team have good quarterback play? Absolutely not. Aaron Rodgers is completely finished. I mean, if you're watching these games, I don't know how you can come to any other conclusion. The guy can't move. He's afraid to look down the field. I mean, he 1 for 6 on passes that traveled more than 10 yards down the field. Only 6 attempts, only 1 completion, almost an interception on one of them. This team doesn't have the quarterback play it needs to win. Is this team well coached? Absolutely not. I mean, how many times can this team start a game flat? How many times can this team not show up at the start of a game? How many mental breakdowns do you see? Jeff Ulbrich has not done. Part of me feels bad for Jeff Ulbrich because I don't think any first time head coach could step into a situation like this and turn it around the way the Jets asked Jeff Ulbrich to do. It was a really foolish thing that Woody Johnson thought Ulbrich could on the fly take over this high profile team in this media market with these big name players, with these egos in the locker room and players who are frankly declining. If we're talking tangible aspects of this team, it was crazy to think a first time head coach could step into this and turn it around. But beyond that, I mean, the Jets just aren't doing basic things. The Jets aren't getting basic things out of this team that you'd expect any coaching staff to get. Is there any fire from this team? Is there any competitiveness? I mean, how many times is this team going to start slow? When I watch these games, especially the last 3 weeks, it's felt like the Jets have been kind of checked out the first half. And, you saw the game against Houston, you saw the game against Arizona, and then you saw this one against Indianapolis. I feel like they're kind of checked out in the first half. And if they're close at halftime, then okay, we'll fight hard. If not, then we'll check out the way we did against Arizona. There was one play, it was right before the Tyler Conklin failed quarterback sneak on 4th down, which we could probably spend the whole segment on the Tyler Conklin quarterback sneak play call. But it was 3rd and 8, and Aaron Rodgers scrambled, and he just pulled up to avoid a hit short of the sticks. And he could have gotten the first down. This is a point where we don't want Aaron Rodgers to expose himself needlessly to hits. But that was a point where the Jets desperately needed a first down. There are moments where you go all out, where you lay yourself on the line, where you absorb a hit to get the first down. That's one of those situations because Jets had no life on offense. They needed it. Aaron Rodgers just pulled up to avoid a hit, and that led to the 4th down play where Tyler Conklin was stopped. And I could not help but think that that's kind of symbolic of the way the Jets play right now, where I'm not saying that last week they quit. This week they played hard for part of the game, but there's just not enough desire to win the games. I mean, I know people don't like the guy I'm about to mention, but I remember when Tom Brady, even when he was in his 40s, there'd be like a reverse and Brady would get down the field and he'd throw a block. He'd throw his body around to try and spring the ball carrier. I mean, that was the competitive fire Tom Brady played with. It was to the point where it was kind of reckless, where it was almost like if you were coaching Brady, you'd tell him don't do it because he cared that much about winning. That play seemed very symbolic when Rodgers just pulled up, and you may not even remember it, but it really stuck in my mind, and it set up the failure on the Tyler Conklin play. It's kind of symbolic of this New York Jets team where they just don't. They're not putting themselves on the line to win games. And when you add that all up, there's just not a lot good you can say about this football team. Maybe it's taking a little bit too far to say there's nothing good about the team, but in the big areas, there's nothing good about the team. The offense stinks, the defense stinks. The coaching stinks, the quarterback stinks, and the competitive fire stinks. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we've discussed some of the tangible issues with the Jets. We're going to continue talking about them because there's another big issue with this football team, and it's just a disappearing act this team shows too frequently. We'll get into more detail on that as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and the Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. And hopefully they'll start putting in some classes about how to be an effective NFL team. Maybe the New York Jets should take that class. We should know that all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. And hopefully your sports opinions do not involve New York Jets performing. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And Mondays are typically for lamenting New York Jets losses in 2024. And it's been that way for many years. Our Monday shows, we talk about why the Jets lost. And that's what we're doing once again today, as the Jets were defeated 28-27 by the Indianapolis Colts. The Jets fall to 3-8 on the 2024 season. They head into their bye week on a very sour note, 2 really bad losses. Heading into their week off. I think the Jets wanted to win this game because they could at least talk themselves into saying, okay, maybe we've turned it around. Maybe we're 4-7. You can see the play up. Well, now the Jets are, each week it becomes more and more difficult to believe that there's going to be some miracle turnaround. And a big part of that is this team has just not shown itself capable of playing good football. It's one thing if you have this record and you've lost a bunch of really tight games, you played at a really high level, you just had a couple of bounces late in games go against you. And look, Jets have been a little unlucky this year. The record in 1-score games is pretty bad. They have had some bad breaks, but I think part of the reason it's so difficult to believe the Jets could ever be a good football team this year is they have such long stretches within games of terrible play. It seems like every week in the first half, they get off to a really, really slow start. And this game was no exception. Again, I gave you some of the facts earlier in the show. On offense, the Jets did not have a first down until there was 2 minutes left in the first half. 5 straight 3-and-outs to start the game. Aaron Rodgers, with 5 minutes left in the second quarter, had 3 passing yards. And that's emblematic of a quarterback who just refuses to throw the ball down the field. A quarterback who's not just afraid of getting hit. I've been talking about how he's afraid of getting hit. I don't think he trusts his arm anymore. And the deeper we get into the season, the worse Rodgers is getting. The first couple of weeks of the season, Rodgers looked like he did not look like vintage Aaron Rodgers. He looked far from it, aside from maybe the game against New England in week 3. But he looked like a credible NFL quarterback. And the deeper we get into the season, the worse he looks. And I think part of it's just like, the NFL season's a grind. It takes a toll on the body, and it especially takes a toll on a 40-year-old body. And I just don't think he can hold. I think the reason he's getting it worse is that the hits are adding up. The wear and tear continues to compile. And there was another moment in this game yesterday where it felt like he was kind of limping after a hit. His body just can't hold up. And that's probably part of the reason the Jets offense is struggling so much. But again, on the defensive side of the ball, there were 2 really bad stretches. Typically you want to start a game well and end a game well. The defense started the game horribly, allowing 3 straight scoring drives, and ended the game horribly, allowing 2 straight touchdown drives. And this goes into there are these long droughts where the Jets can't play football effectively. When is the last time the Jets actually played well for a full 60-minute game? Again, it might be that week 3 game against New England. That might be the only time that is the only time this year the Jets have played 60 good minutes. Even think about their other wins. The game against Tennessee, week 2, they played horribly the first quarter and a half to 2 quarters of that game. Game against Houston, the fans were booing them off the field at halftime. Rodgers had 32 passing yards at halftime. And this is emblematic of a team that, struggles to win. And this is why I think it's tough to say that, the Jets have been, to an extent, to a degree, unlucky in close games this year. Again, they've lost a bunch of 1-score games that could have gone either way. But it's easy to sit around and say, well, if we had a better kicker, we'd be a good team. But look at the actual caliber of play this Jets team has shown through the course of the season, where they just, they can't put 60 minutes of good football together. The game in London against Minnesota, where they got blown out in the first half. And yeah, they mounted a comeback in the second half, but it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough because of how poorly they played in the first half of that football game. The game against Buffalo, essentially was 4 quarters of really bad football. I mean, there were a few, they had the miracle Hail Mary, but they couldn't execute in that game, especially, in the red zone. They had issues there. The Pittsburgh game, they played a good first 29 minutes. I don't want to say a good first half because Rodgers' interception with 1 minute left in the first half really swung that game. And the Steelers got a score off that interception. They showed out and got dominated in the second half. And I think at some point, that's who you are. Bill Parcells always had this expression, you are what your record says you are. And that's true in the standings. That's true when we determine who makes the playoffs. That's not always true though when we're talking about the actual quality of a football team. There are some good teams that just have unlucky seasons. There are some bad teams that just catch incredibly good luck, injury luck, schedule luck within games, good bounces, bad calls that go their way. But this is not a team that's been inordinately unlucky. This is a team that just played a lot of really bad football. And there are lots of reasons for that. I mean, I think most people go to the coaching. I think the reason most people go to the coaching is because in theory, it's the easiest thing to fix. People don't want to believe that the talent's actually bad. Because if the talent's bad, there's nothing you can do in season. If the coaching is bad, the coaching you can just improve or you can fire the coach. Well, firing the coach hasn't really helped anything with the Jets. At the moment, I didn't think it would hurt. When the Jets fired Robert Saleh, I was a skeptic that it would help. I didn't think it would hurt. It actually has hurt, in my opinion. Because I think one of the things that's becoming clear is the defense has really regressed since Saleh left. And I would make an educated guess that Saleh was much more hands-on with the defense than the Jets led on. Because this defense, and even though I was a skeptic, the first couple of weeks, if you listen to the podcast, go back and listen to them, I was saying I didn't think the defense was that good, but the defense shouldn't be this bad. I think part of it's that they fired Saleh, and I'm not saying Saleh is a good coach, but I'm saying at the moment you had two very flawed options: Saleh or Jeff Ulbrich. And of the two bad options, Saleh was the better of those options. The coaching's just not good. And I think we could say chapter and verse on the offensive side of the ball about how the coaching's not good. The talent's also just not good either. I mean, we're past the point where anybody can say this is a talented football team, because a lot of the idea that this was a super talented football team was based on Aaron Rodgers playing like Aaron Rodgers, and Tyron Smith playing like Tyron Smith, and Hassan Reddick playing like Hassan Reddick, and Devontae Adams playing like Devontae Adams. Although he had a good game, I don't want to pick on Devontae because he played well yesterday. These guys are not superstars anymore. If you had these guys in their primes, this would be a super talented football team. You have these guys at the end of their careers, or in the case of Reddick, a guy who just doesn't care because he's checked out, the team's losing, and he's just looking to his next payday during the course of the offseason. And these are the things that lead into these long stretches of bad football. This is not a team that's been inordinately, snake bitten. This is a team that's just not that good. And they show it week by week, the way they start games, the long droughts on offense, the defensive lapses in key spots. It's just not a good team. And there are going to need to be major changes made this offseason. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, though, we're going to talk about some very odd media reports. At least I find them odd, because these media reports present what I think is a false choice. And they make what should be a pretty obvious decision, and they take it and they turn it into something as though there's a real question of what the Jets should do. And I'll tell you I'll tell you all about this as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Jets are not playing this coming weekend. I mean, should I make the joke that the bye week is favored by the Jets over the Jets by 3 points? That's the state of the Jets right now. The Jets were favored by the Colts by 3.5 points. I'm sorry if you bet on them, but you should have known better. But the good news is that FanDuel is the place to get in on the action. Again, you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Monday, the Jets were defeated by the Indianapolis Colts 28-27 at MetLife Stadium in Week 11 action. It's clear that this thing has not worked for the Jets. This Aaron Rodgers all-in, go for it mindset that we've seen the last 2 years has been a colossal failure. And I think one of the things that's disappointing about it is that, the Jets are being compared with the other super team, quote unquote, super teams in the NFL that have failed through recent years. I mean, the Washington team in 2000, when they got Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith, a bunch of all-time players. That's one team that they get compared to. The Eagles, quote unquote, dream team in 2011 when they signed Nnamdi Asomugha and Asante Samuel. That's another example. But the difference is those teams actually showed they could play the game effectively. Even if they were ultimately disappointments, they had moments where they looked like great teams. The 2000 Washington team went 8-8. They weren't a disaster. They weren't one of the worst teams in the NFL. Again, the 2011 Eagles were 7-9. They didn't do it enough, but they had moments where they looked really good, including for the 2011 Eagles, one game against the Jets late in the season where they absolutely crushed the New York Jets. This Jets team's just bad. It's one of the worst teams in the NFL. And that's why I find some reports that are coming out about Aaron Rodgers' future to be kind of confounding. And they've come out from multiple reporters this week that Aaron Rodgers is not inclined to return if the Jets make wholesale changes in their front office and coaching staff. And it's framed as though this is a consideration the Jets should make, that maybe the Jets should keep their front office and coaching staff in place if they want to keep Rodgers. And I sit there and I say, why would they want to keep Rodgers? Why would this make you more likely to not clean house? Now, Joe Douglas, we don't know what's going on with him. There are all kinds of rumors about Joe Douglas, already looking for another job. I don't know whether they're true or not, but I think one thing's clear. Joe Douglas probably is not going to be back here next year and probably should not be back here next year. The other thing about Joe Douglas that we don't talk enough about is he's in the final year of his contract. So this is not just a matter of whether the Jets want Joe Douglas back. It's also a matter of, does Joe Douglas want to return? And after what's happened the last couple of years, given the difficulty of the situation any general manager will have with this team going forward, because it's going to be a very challenging set of circumstances for a general manager. This Jets team has really put himself in a really tough spot. And Joe Douglas, it seems like he's been stripped of his authority because Jets made three major moves in October. They fired their coach. They made a big trade for Davante Adams, and they ended the Hassan Reddick holdout. It doesn't seem like Douglas was involved in any of them. As far as the coaching staff goes, I mean, why on earth would you keep Jeff Ulbrich? Look, he might be a good assistant. He's shown he's not head coaching material right now. Tough spot, I know, but even by the standards, even by the expectations I had, which were pretty low, Ulbrich has not met them. But what difference does it make what Aaron Rodgers wants? Aaron Rodgers looks completely washed up. I mean, he's averaging 6.4 yards per attempt this season. That's awful. And the reason his efficiency numbers are so low is that, again, he's afraid to throw the ball down the field. We talk about tangible issues with the Jets. There are lots of intangible issues. There's lots of stuff in the locker room off the field that are problems. We talk about tangible issues with the Jets. The complete inability to make big plays in the passing game is at the top of the list. I mean, the Jets can only make a big play in the passing game if somebody has a big catch and run. So if it's a check down to Breece Hall and he makes something happen with it, a big play can happen. A couple of nice runs after the catch for Davante Adams in that game yesterday. Garrett Wilson's shown he's capable of doing it, but there's really very limited big play ability in this Jets passing game. And that's because Rodgers has gone from a guy who threw the ball down the field as frequently as any quarterback in the NFL to a guy who's just afraid to stand in the pocket. When you watch Rodgers, there's something that really stands out to me. Is that if the other team only rushes three, and the Colts did this in the key spot in the game yesterday, if the other team rushes three, Rodgers actually will stand tall in the pocket and he will move around. He actually he's fine moving left and right if there's only three guys because he feels comfortable. He knows he's not going to get hit. Aside from the end of the game, the last drive, he actually did get hit when the Colts rushed three. But generally speaking, if you watch him this year, that's like the one time he's been fine standing in the pocket. And that tells me he is afraid. I keep saying he's afraid of getting hit. That's one of the reasons why I think he's afraid of getting hit, because the only time he'll stand in the pocket is when the odds of him getting hit are very low. He's a different quarterback when the other team only rushes three guys. He lets plays marinate. He lets his receivers get down the field. His arm is not, I've spent the last 2 years leading into 2024 saying that his arm is as good as, close to as good as it's ever been. I don't think that's true anymore. Maybe, again, that could be the wear and tear of the season. But the arm seems to be diminished. And I think that's another thing that's playing into his fear of throwing the ball down the field. I mean, what's the difference between Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson right now? I think that the only real difference is Rodgers doesn't make the really dumb throws. He doesn't put the ball in danger as frequently as Zach Wilson did. But the issue with one of the biggest issues with Zach Wilson a year ago and back in 2022 was that there was really not much big playability. That Zach Wilson was just trying to get the ball out. He was trying to avoid big mistakes. And we can debate whether or not he was coached into that, whether or not that was a good idea. But we're essentially at the same point where this offense can't make big plays in the passing game unless somebody does something special. And that's not a good place to be. So why would you want Aaron Rodgers back at this point? I mean, if you bring him back, he's going to be expensive. And not only that, there are going to be these residual costs because if you bring him back, you're probably bringing back Devontae Adams. So another $35 million in cap space that's going to him, or you have to restructure the deal and guarantee a 32-year-old receiver multiple years. Lazard's probably staying. So that's another $11 million. What else are the Jets going to do? Are the Jets going to continue this ill-fated all-ins thing? Is it essentially turned into a zombie all-in bid if Rodgers is around next year? I don't think this team can I don't really have much faith in the ownership to turn this around anyway. But one thing I know is that this team cannot turn it around until Aaron Rodgers is not in the building anymore, because Aaron Rodgers has shown that he's an impediment to this team's success. And it's it's not all his fault. Like, the Jets have had issues before Aaron Rodgers arrived. Aaron Rodgers is more a symptom of the disease than the disease itself with the New York Jets. But they have to relieve themselves of the symptom, because everything that's happened since Aaron Rodgers has arrived here has been detrimental to this team. So why would you keep a bad coach? And why would you try and keep a GM who just hasn't done the job well enough to try and bring back a guy who will be 41 years old entering the season, will turn 42 during the season, and can't play effectively? That's what you're getting out of it. You're going to bring back these guys who don't do their jobs well just to get another season out of a declining quarterback who can't play quarterback effectively enough. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm sure there's going to be a topic of conversation in the weeks ahead. I have no idea why it's being framed as though this is a tough decision for the New York Jets, but I'm ready to say everything I've got about this. If this is the way the New York media wants to portray it, then I'm going to speak out against this, because it's ludicrous. The idea that Aaron Rodgers should come back next year is ludicrous to me. But that's all. That's a story for another day. That's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, please give this episode a big thumbs up. That helps other Jets fans find this podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. Or at least enjoy as much as you can after this terrible Jets performance. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.